Okay, so today we're going to do a deep dive into something you guys asked about.
All right.
You asked us to look into what J. Michael Luttig is so worried about.
Right?
And he's a big name, conservative legal circles, former federal judge.
Sure.
Um, and he's really concerned about what President Trump has been saying about the judiciary.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we want to do today is unpack this for you. Like, what is this potential constitutional crisis that Luttig is warning us about?
Sure.
He wrote an op-ed about it in the New York Times on March 23rd, and that's what we're going to be looking at today.
Sounds good.
Cool. So, why should we even care what Luttig thinks?
Well, to understand that, you got to consider who this guy is. He served on the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals.
Okay.
Appointed by a Republican president, been a really respected figure in conservative legal thought for a long time.
Gotcha.
And recently endorsed Kamala Harris, which is super unusual for someone like him.
Right.
And for him, that really shows how important the rule of law is to him, above all else. So when a guy like that starts ringing alarm bells,
Yeah,
that should get your attention.
definitely. So what exactly is he so worried about?
Well, he's saying that early on in his second term, President Trump has basically declared war on the federal judiciary.
Whoa.
Yeah, he doesn't hold back. He calls it a stunning frontal assault on the third branch of government
Wow.
and the American system of justice, and says we're headed for a constitutional crisis.
Okay, so strong words, but what's making him say this? Like, what happened?
So the specific thing that's got him worried is that Trump has been talking about impeaching federal judges
Oh, wow.
who are temporarily blocking his executive orders.
Huh.
And this isn't just theoretical. He's calling out specific judges
Right.
for doing exactly what they're supposed to do,
Yeah.
acting as a check on executive power.
Right.
Like one example Luttig talks about is Judge James Boasberg.
Okay.
Boasberg temporarily blocked the deportations of some Venezuelan nationals
Okay.
who were connected to this gang called the Tren de Aragua. And Trump's immediate reaction was to call for Boasberg's impeachment.
So what's Luttig's point here?
Well, his point is that even if you really want a certain outcome,
Right.
like in this case, removing these potentially dangerous people,
Yeah.
you still have to follow the Constitution.
Okay.
And it's the judiciary's job to make sure those boundaries are respected.
Makes sense.
And, to kind of reinforce Luttig's concerns, even Supreme Court Justice John Roberts
Right.
has implicitly spoken out about the importance of an independent judiciary
Okay.
and checks and balances. So it's not just Luttig who's worried about this.
So I guess the takeaway is that even wanting to do something, arguably good
Right.
doesn't mean you can ignore the process.
Exactly.
Interesting. And I like that quote from Luttig where he says
Oh, yeah.
that Judge Boasberg doesn't want to assume the role of president.
Mm.
The president wants to assume the role of judge.
Yeah, that really gets to the heart of it.
So where does Luttig think all of this is headed?
Well, he's pretty pessimistic. He thinks that unless Trump changes course,
Yeah.
this constitutional crisis is only going to get worse.
Oh, geez.
And Trump is going to become less and less effective.
Wow. So what can we do about it?
Well, Luttig's call to action is basically that the Supreme Court, Congress, and ultimately the American people might have to step in and say enough is enough if Trump keeps trying to take over the court's authority.
That's a lot to think about.
Yeah, this situation really highlights how delicate the balance of power is in our system.
Yeah.
You've got the executive branch wanting to do its thing,
Mm-hmm.
and then the judiciary's job is to make sure they stay within the lines.
Right.
And when that balance gets messed with, it can have some pretty serious consequences.
Yeah. So we need to ask ourselves, given that Luttig is a conservative,
Right.
what does his warning say about how stable our legal norms really are right now?
Right.
And if we don't do something about this, what could it mean for the separation of powers in the long run?
Those are some big questions.
Definitely something for everyone to think about. Thanks for diving deep with us.
Anytime.
See you next time.
Bye.